worldviews, values and practices of indigenous peoples and local communities, that they are respected, documented, preserved with their free, prior and informed consent, including their effective participation in decision making in accordance with relevant national legislation and international instruments, including the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And that includes human rights law as well, yeah? So there will be, I think Dr. Poline will be talking about meaningful stakeholder consultations. What do we mean by real participation by indigenous peoples? So this framework also talks about intergenerational transmission of knowledge, and that's where we have indigenous language as a transmission of that language, knowledge as well, and saving and revitalization of indigenous language is also crucial to ensure the protection of cultural identity and the dignity of indigenous peoples, and to safeguard their traditional heritage. All right, and this way we see a continuation of transmission of culture, customs, and history. So we have a very distinguished panel here to discuss this. Let me just introduce very briefly, according to the order of presentation. Professor Poline will come first, will speak on the deploying contemporary digital technologies and meaningful community engagement events for the protection of indigenous and local knowledge in the tropics. Professor Dr. Poline did her PhD in social anthropology at Cambridge University. She's now the director of the Institute of Borneo Studies, and over the past 2 decades she's carried out research in the field of society-technology relationships, especially societal issues surrounding small people at the margins of technological advancement. And then we will have, we are privileged to have Professor Emeritus Dr. Haja Asma Haji Omar. She really doesn't need very much introduction. I think many of us know her as one of the most prominent linguists in Malaysia. She's done a lot of pioneering work and leader in many capacities, as dean and as she was a special assistant to the Vice Chancellor in the implementation of the National Language Policy in the university. And she continues, I think, with this work with extensive writing on her research spanning many nations. So we're so glad that we're able to hear from Dato this morning, or this afternoon now. And the next speaker will be His Excellency Alejandro, is that how I pronounce it? Yes. Yeah. Ambassador of Colombia, a biologist with a strong background in rural development and sustainability. And he has worked with the international NGO, and his focus has been on promoting fair and sustainable agricultural practices and inclusive natural resource management. So he has managed community-based conservation programs across Latin America and has worked in various initiatives with organizations to promote this work. So we have really very good panel members to speak to us today. So I will just call out them one by one, and then they present their papers. Maybe we'll have 15 minutes each. After that, we'll open it up for discussion. All right? So if I may call on Professor Dr. Poline first to speak. We'll just, is that okay? We'll just sit here and speak, yeah? All right?
Thank you, Associate Professor Dr. Rami, for that kind introduction. Can you hear me? So, as she mentioned, my work over the last few years has been working with indigenous people, various communities in Sabah and Sarawak, and also in Peninsula Malaysia, especially in Kelantan and Bahang among the orang asli. Basically looking at working with the policy on bridging digital divide between the urban and rural communities in Malaysia. So my take on this topic basically I will be drawing from those experiences over 25 years working with the Penan and the Nun Bawang and the Kelabit, and also the Kadazan Dusun and the Bajau in Sabah. The role of, as mentioned by the moderator, there is an increased concern and also recognition of the role of traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge, in coming up with solutions to contemporary issues at the global level, right? So there are efforts to kind of how do we capture this knowledge? How do we document them? How do we protect them? Because the nature of this, as mentioned by the moderator, this nature of knowledge is quite particular in the sense that it is being passed down from one generation to another generation, right? So it is unlike the scientific knowledge that we are used to, that we go to school, right? We are taught certain skills, particularly to read and to write, to engage with this particular knowledge, and it requires us to do a lot of cerebral thinking. Now, the indigenous knowledge is something that is very experiential based. That is something that you gather through your life experience, and then you pass it orally from one generation to another. So these are some of so how do we go about it? Now, I put there in my topic the deployment of the current contemporary digital technologies. As we know, digital technologies are very easy to use and very small, small and easy to use them. You can move around with them, unlike, let's say, when I began to do this work years ago, you have to carry the big video into the interior, but now you have digital technologies, it's easy to use. But then, how do you, the other title there is the meaningful engagement. Now there's the issue, yes, it's very important to protect this, it's very important to document, but there is also an issue with indigenous people being, what they call it, their indigenous knowledge being robbed from them. Because the moment they get into the digital technology, right, and you have these issues with intellectual property rights, who records it first, who writes it first, it becomes theirs. To transform it from oral based to become written knowledge, that is when the issue of intellectual property rights coming in. So quite a number of these indigenous people now feeling like, okay, are you coming to record my song? Are you going to come and record my artwork? So who is going to own it in the end? So that is why my thought here is the use of the word meaningful engagement is very deliberate, in the sense that when we use technology which is so available, so easy, but we have to be very aware that at the end of the day, who owns the knowledge? I have a community, for instance, they had a very good government body, agency came and said, we want to record your story about this particular story. So they came and recorded, did the video, recorded everything, and then transformed it into a book. Now this community later on said, oh, we want to use whatever is recorded in the book, we want to transform it into something, a dance drama. And they were told by these people who have written it, now if you have to do that, you have to pay us 15,000 ringgit, right? So this community is like, I thought this is ours. Why do we have to pay this certain amount of money to translate what we've told you orally and to translate this into a dance drama? So this is why one of the issues, when we talk about contemporary, the power of contemporary digital technologies, yes, it's important to capture what the vanishing traditions, but these are some of the issues that they have to deal with. Sorry? Okay. Now, the other aspect that I would like to highlight is the lack of understanding when we talk about indigenous knowledge. Now, if you look at some of the definitions, they always say indigenous knowledge are songs, they are culture, they are dance, and so on and so forth. So it is falling in that domain, and I went through some of the definitions, and that is quite prominent in a sense. Now, this is basically because many of us, we don't realize that there is a thing called the native philosophy. There is a way of how natives look at the world, yeah? And unlike scientific understanding, which we have seen yesterday, I know some of the speakers were saying, how do we bring spiritual values into the things that we are doing, right? Now, these things are very natural for the indigenous people because, first of all, yeah, spiritual agency is so much part of how they understand the world, yeah? They look at things, and that's one. Secondly, in scientific knowledge, which is the exploration of the unknown, how do you get to see the unknown and understand the unknown? The obsession with categorization.